We've done several videos on UBS and GSIBs, and today I want to talk about counterparty exposure. So, our saying is if one GSIB goes, they all go. So, how do we know this? Okay, so let's talk about this. If you do a trade, I'm talking about us, retail, you and me. I sell 100 shares of a stock, doesn't matter, and you buy that 100 shares from me. So you're my counterparty. I sell the stock, you pay me cash, then the contract is over. There's nothing left to do. You have my stock, I have the money, okay? Now let's take it a little differently. Let's say you buy a structured product from your firm, okay? And it could be anything. Underwritten by Goldman, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citi, Morgan Stanley, doesn't matter. So you sit there and say, I'd like to buy this structured product, and I'm going to put $100,000 into the trade, okay? So you go into your firm, and you say, I want to buy this thing for $100,000. So now you have to realize that you now have counterparty exposure. So let's say that you bought the structured product from Goldman Sachs, okay? So what's a structured product? A structured product is nothing more than a debt obligation of the issuing firm, in this case, Goldman Sachs. It's a bond, okay? And the length of the bond is the length of the structured product you buy. I've seen them for 2.9 years, 13 months. They're very rarely less than a year because of taxes, okay? So we basically go from 13 months, I've seen them as long as 10 years, okay? But they are a debt obligation of Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, it doesn't matter, okay? And they are now, you now have counterparty exposure. You paid $100,000, you have your structured product based on performance of the underlying vehicles that you chose, okay? And if you want, someday I can go through on how structured products work, what are the 5 structures and all this other stuff, but that's what we're talking about today. So, why do you have counterparty exposure to Goldman Sachs? Well, if Goldman Sachs goes belly up, okay, you lose $100,000. In debt, all right, there are layers of debt. You have senior debt, which is the best debt. You have mezzanine, you have junior debt, you have unsecured debt, you have secured debt, you have all kinds, okay? So when you get to the bottom rung, okay, jump down 10 feet, and that's where a structured product is on the ladder of debt. They pay the people who clean the floors before they pay you back your $100,000 if they go bankrupt. And by the way, with the leverage that these firms are using, none of those bonds are going to get paid. None, okay? I'm just saying you have zero chance of being paid, all right? And we found this out during the great financial crisis. Anybody who bought a Lehman or Bear Stearns structured product, SOL, you lost all your money. Now, the firm that you ticketed it at, let's say a Morgan or a UBS, they could go in and give you your money back if they feel that way, but they don't actually have to. In some cases, we did pay off, okay? I can tell you, I paid off many Lehman notes, many Lehman notes, okay? So, you now have counterparty exposure. It has nothing to do with the investment. It has to who issued the investment. Okay, does it make sense? All right. Now, let's look at a report on derivatives. So basically, derivatives are a debt obligation of the issuing firm. That's all it is. All right. Now, there are many reasons that people issue derivatives. Okay, and participate in them. Here's a list of all the industries that use them. Okay, so I want you to remember something though. All right? So when you look at this and we say, oh, it's just a commodity firm protecting the price of the commodity that they're using, and so that they can, have a more secure way of knowing what price they're going to get. Perfect, okay? That's what derivatives were invented for, all right? But people use them as a trading vehicle. So they'll sit there and they'll say, I'm going to do this derivative because I think this commodity is going to go up and I can make money. So there's multiple uses of all these derivatives. But in the end, they are all debt obligations of the issuing firm, all right? And by the way, every one of these firms is levered up so much, you have no comprehension on how unstable their debt structure is. And you, by buying this structured product, are at the bottom of the debt structure, okay? Now this is last year, like last June or July, whatever it is. And this was between the FDIC and the Fed came out with this, all right? So this is, and the reason I'm mentioning the FDIC, you're gonna see they're gonna name the 4 firms here: Goldman, JP Morgan, Citi, and Bank of America. Now, it's to my understanding, I could be wrong here, there's nothing to make money on here, but I believe Morgan Stanley is the largest issuer of derivatives, all right? The reason they're not here is this is an FDIC Fed study. And Morgan Stanley does not have the deposit levels guaranteed by the US government that these firms do, okay? That's why they're not on the list. It has nothing to do with the amount of derivatives they have. But I want you to look and see that they have, as they say here, $192 trillion worth of derivatives outstanding. These 4 firms. We're not even talking about Morgan Stanley, who's the largest issuer of all. So these 4 firms, okay, and Morgan Stanley, in the great financial crisis, and Goldman Sachs became banks. They had to, or the Fed couldn't give them any money. And the only reason they became banks, they don't want to be banks because then you're regulated harder, but they wanted the money, so they became banks, all right? So look at what they say here, that out of the $192 trillion in all the US banks, 87% are held by 4 banks. We have 4,587 banks. 4 banks own 87% of all the derivatives in the country, okay? In the world, basically, for our country. And we are at risk because of this. So what does this mean? I want you to think of something. So 4 banks have 160, let's say they have 40 trillion apiece, okay? And you have to remember how this happens. So the commodity firm calls up and says, hey, we're mining gold and we want to put a derivative to ensure the pricing, and we need $1 billion worth, okay? And they call up JP Morgan. JP Morgan then gives them the derivative to protect them on their price on gold, all right? Now, what does JP Morgan do? Well, JP Morgan says, ooh, that's a lot of money here. So what they do is they call up Citicorp and they say, hey, we want to lay off some of this risk that we took on this gold. Will you take the opposite side trade? So now you have another leg to the trade. And by the way, it may not have gone to one firm. You may have to go to 2 firms to cover yourself. So this goes back and forth. So as you know, I keep telling you that these things are so intertwined that you have no comprehension, all right? The biggest thing is that these are debt obligations of these firms, okay? $192 trillion worth of derivatives, all based on these banks. Now you got to remember something. They own stocks, they own everything, they own property, they own everything. This is just a piece of what they own. So if a G-SIB goes belly up and they're involved with the derivative market, it's like the dominoes, right? Everyone's gone, okay? That's all it is. Like and follow, tell me what you think in the comments.